This year, I'm attempting the Spend All Your Money challenge. One of my big goals this year is to transition to doing all of my videos in 4K. For those of you who are not very technical, I've always done all my videos in 1080p, which means they are 1080 pixels tall and 1920 pixels wide, which is about the size of your average laptop screen. But I want to start doing them in 4K, which is twice as many pixels wide and twice as many pixels high, so 4 times as many pixels in total. That way, if you're watching on a big screen like a TV, it still looks fully detailed. It also means if I decide to crop in on something in the video to give you a closer look, it still looks pretty detailed. As it turns out, handling 4K footage is really expensive. I started with buying a new camera. It's actually kind of crazy that I've been making YouTube videos for 8 years and this is my first time owning a camera with interchangeable lenses, but that was only the beginning. Turns out if you're gonna be shooting 4K footage, you're gonna need some special high-speed SD cards because of the sheer amount of information that the camera has to record to the SD card every second. There's an extra row of contacts on the back and they are way more expensive. So now we're all set, right? Nope. Turns out when cameras shoot 4K footage, they get super hot, and if they overheat, they shut down. A more expensive camera would have a built-in fan or cooling system. Mine doesn't, so I had to buy one. This just clips onto the back of the camera where the screen folds out from. So I will be testing this out. Once we have a real hot day, I'm gonna take it outside and see just how long I can shoot 4K without the camera shutting down with the fan running. And then comes the big problem that I've been trying really hard not to think about. Turns out editing 4K footage takes a significant amount of computer power, and my 8-year-old computer is not going to cut it. So today I'm going to be hopefully fixing that problem. Now, if you were to go on YouTube and search up like a video about building a computer, you're gonna find a lot of computer channels, and all those channels are watched by people who know all about building computers. This is technically a computer build video, I guess, but this is not a computer channel. And a lot of my audience is not a computer audience. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show you each of these parts and explain in very basic terms what each of them does, in case anybody's vaguely curious about what the computer build process looks like. Maybe this will help demystify the computer building process. What I have in mind is 8 years ago when I told my grandparents that I built a computer. I think in their minds that means that I was like in the Matrix or something. So we're just gonna try to demystify the computer building process a little bit. This is the motherboard. This is basically the middle piece. To simplify it down, everything connects to this. All the different computer components, either they connect directly on it or they plug into it, and it sends information back and forth between all the different parts. They all plug into this. The processor is going to go right here. Right here on the back of the motherboard, we got all our USB ports and other ports. This rectangle right here is basically going to become part of the back of the computer. I am going to put this securely back in the anti-static pouch that it comes in. This is the processor. This basically does all the thinking and the working, and this is what makes the computer fast mainly. On the back you can see all these contacts, and these contacts are how it sends information to and from the motherboard. All these components are very delicate, and when you're handling them and touching them, you generally want to be connected to the computer case with an anti-static bracelet. Basically, you connect this cable to it, and then this clips onto the computer. This makes contact with your wrist. That way, if there's any static charge in your body, like if you get off a trampoline and then touch somebody and there's a zap, this will make sure you're grounded so that you're not gonna zap any of the sensitive computer components and ruin them and cost yourself hundreds of dollars. I'm gonna be reusing the SSD that's in my existing computer because it's not that old. An SSD and a hard drive, this is a hard drive, basically do the same thing. SSDs and hard drives are 2 types of storage. Storage is where all of your files are. They're where your operating system is stored. They are where any programs that you run on your computer, any software are stored. And they do the same thing, except SSDs are faster. Now I'm gonna use an analogy. If your storage is your filing room, it's like a room full of filing cabinets where the computer stores all the information and it can go in there and find anything it needs. That would make the RAM your computer's desk. It's the top of your computer's desk. It takes your computer time to go into the filing room, dig through the filing cabinet, and find the file that it needs. The RAM is the top of the desk, where the computer puts a copy of all of the files that it's actively referencing. Anything that it's actively using sits on the desk because the computer is looking at that right now. If I'm playing a video game and, I don't know, my game character is standing in the middle of the woods, then somewhere in the computer is a file for what the game character looks like, and a file for how the game character moves. There's a file for each individual tree that's in the woods and what that tree looks like. There's a file for what the lighting looks like. And as I'm playing that game and I'm in that space, the computer is constantly referencing each of those files. It's constantly looking at them and comparing and putting that information on the screen. So that information, while it's doing that, is going to be stored on the RAM. The more RAM you have, the more your computer can multitask. You can have multiple windows open, multiple tabs, multiple programs running at once, because your computer is able to have all this information right in front of it where it can see it all at one time. And generally RAM comes in 2s. Maybe somebody who's a lot smarter than me can explain to you why we do that. I think it's just so that it's like a computer can use both hands at one time. Now this right here, this is the most exciting part of a computer, I think. This is also the most expensive part of any computer that's going to be dealing with graphics. Now a computer for video games and a computer for video editing are both very similar. They need very similar parts because they're both dealing with graphics. If you want to run your video games with the graphics settings turned all the way up, have everything look really realistic, or if you want to edit 4K video footage. Both of those are very heavy on graphics processing. So this is the GPU, or the graphics card, graphics processing unit. It's similar to the CPU, the central processing unit, which that does all the thinking in general. This does all the thinking for graphics specifically. The better graphics card you have, the more realistic your games can look, and the smoother your games will run. This is the old graphics card. Significantly smaller, and the change in size is probably proportional to the change in power. And right here on the back, you can't really see it because they're covered up with little plastic caps right now, but these are the ports that connect to the monitor. So this panel right here is also going to become part of the back of the computer, just like the motherboard. Now processor, whether it's the GPU or the CPU that we talked about earlier, they can pretty much run as fast as you want them to. The catch is you got to keep them cool, because processors get really hot, and if they get hot, they're gonna slow down or they're gonna damage themselves. So we got fans, we got radiators inside, and for the CPU that I showed you earlier, we have a water cooler that I'm gonna show you in a bit. Now, because I bought a very powerful GPU for video editing, technically this computer will also be very capable of playing almost any video game with the graphics settings cranked all the way up. So it's honestly kind of sad that the only game I'm interested in playing right now is The Long Dark, which runs fine on the old computer. I'm not really going to be taking advantage of what this thing is capable of. I don't even know if I own any games that will take advantage of what this thing is capable of. I just want to edit my videos, man. For the CPU that I showed you earlier, most computers will keep that cool using a fan and radiator similar to what's on the GPU. The one that I bought in particular gets really, really hot. So instead of just a fan, I'm going to be using a water cooling system. I'm not going to take this out of the box right now because it's basically just going to look like a panel of fans with some tubes going to a thing that goes on the processor. So this literally has water going through tubes, and then the fans cool the water before it goes back to the processor, and that's going to help keep it cool. You can build a water cooling system yourself and do all these custom tubing and colored coolant. I would be terrified to do that. I am not an expert. This is my first time using water cooling. So I just bought an all-in-one cooler that's already sealed. It has the water inside, everything is sealed up. I don't have to put anything together. This is the power supply. This basically just handles the electricity. The power cable for the computer is going to go right in there. And then there are going to be cables connected to each of these ports that carry power from this to all the different computer components that we've talked about. This one is 850 watts. Basically, you just look online, see how much power each of your components draws, and then add all those up and get a power supply that's rated for that much power. The processor and the graphics card are definitely the things that eat the most power. That's why they get so hot. Most computers don't need this. This is a capture card. Basically, it has an HDMI input. This will be one of the back panels of the computer. You can plug an HDMI cable into that, and then I can record. For instance, I can plug one of my cameras into the back of this, and then I can record the camera directly into the computer. Anything that has an HDMI output, I could plug it into this and I could record whatever that thing is doing on my computer. I'm gonna be reusing the case from my old computer. It does kind of feel like reusing the case from the old computer and reusing the SSD is kind of going to take the new car smell out of having a new computer, because as far as what you see on the outside and what you see on the screen when you boot up the computer, it's gonna look like exactly the same computer. It'll seem like nothing has changed, it's just gonna be a lot faster. But I didn't want to waste money on that. I don't really care what my computer looks like, I just care about function, because I personally, right now, at least in this office, I prefer to have the computer out of sight, under the desk, just doing its job very, very well, out of sight. Maybe the next one, I'll buy a fancy case and make one that looks really cool. But I do think I'll get that sort of new car smell scent from having 2 new monitors that are way bigger than my old ones, more pixels, bigger screen, better color accuracy, and these also have a higher refresh rate. I'm going from 60 Hertz to 180, I think, so more frames per second. So hopefully that'll feel new and fresh. And I also got a floating monitor mount because I really hate having things sitting on the desk. I've had my microphone floating above the desk for a while. That feels awesome. I've got my camera floating, and now I'm gonna have my monitors floating. So the only thing left really is the speakers. If you guys have any idea how I can get my speakers off the desk, that would be amazing, because I've not been able to figure out an effective way to do that yet. So the build process was way more time consuming than I thought. Ran into a bunch of problems, but I think it's all together now. Theoretically, it will boot. Instead of closing everything up and then putting it under the desk and setting up the new monitors, because the old monitors are still over there, it's towards the end of the day. I just want to see if it runs. I just want to make sure it runs, so I've got one of the new monitors just sitting here. Theoretically, it will run, and we can test it and just make sure it's alive. Here we go. Okay. Things are happening. Things are lighting up. The monitor's not getting a signal. Trying a different display port on the graphics card. Okay, something's happening. It looks like the motherboard's booting up. The BIOS, so... Hey! We're alive! Okay, Sid has shown his ugly face. The computer lives. There might be some slight tweaking and troubleshooting to do because I don't know much about fans. Let's see. I'm gonna try to run a game, I guess. Okay, let's do Lego Worlds because we know that that takes some power. It's still running in 1080p because my old monitor was smaller, but we'll fix that in a minute. We've got slow frame rates. Why are the frame rates so low? Okay, we are gonna go into the game settings. Okay, the computer does not seem to be taking keyboard input right now. I am just gonna go eat and then call my friend who knows a lot more about computers than me and see what we can do. The mouse, the frame rates are fine when it's just the mouse on the desktop. It's the game that was struggling. So maybe just the game settings were confused about the new graphics card, and I don't know. I'm just gonna shut it down, but the computer runs. It boots. Okay, we are up and running. Time has passed. If I look funny, it's because I went to the beach and got a little sunburned, and also I just look funny. Computer seems to run great. I had to install a lot of drivers and stuff. Drivers tell the computer how to use the parts that are in it. I think that's a pretty accurate description. So once I got all those on there, we're up and running. Everything seems to work great. I've been using it for a while now. Windows has decided that it is not activated anymore. So we're gonna fix that. I'm gonna be switching to Windows 11 anyway. Currently, you can see the graphics card is running at about 9%, 8% capacity. That is because I am screen recording in 4K. We are going to try some games and see what happens. Oh, I have never seen the graphics card actually run close to 100%. So when we load up a new world in Lego Worlds, normally it takes some time for the landscape to generate. On this, it seems to generate the entire landscape before the ship even enters the atmosphere. Before the ship even left the atmosphere of the first world, the second world was already loaded up. So now as we land, everything's already there. That is the maximum landscape draw distance The game settings are cranked all the way up. Everything was already generated on the second world before we even left the first one. I am getting 150 frames per second. Looks like at the lowest, maybe 130. For anyone who's not into gaming or film, 60 frames per second is enough. 150, way beyond completely unnecessary. Also worth noting, the LEGO Worlds settings don't go any higher than 2560 by 1440. I can't run the game at 4K. Everything I'm doing here is a little bit silly. I don't have any like really high quality graphics games. Any game that I have in my Steam library, this computer is going to run at an absurd frame rate without breaking a sweat. Loading up the long dark. Looks like we've got 180 frames per second. Got a steady 180 frames per second. When I ran this without the screen recorder, I could not get any game to push the graphics card past 20%. Recording the screen in 4K is taking some energy, but not too much. It's very capable of doing it, but it does actually make it put in some effort, which the games by themselves do not. I've got the settings on this cranked up as well, all the way, which basically means the trees, even in the distance, have the full level of detail, which in this game is not much. Okay, let's try a game that my old computer actually would struggle with, which is Gang Beasts. For some reason, Gang Beasts is really hard to run. I could never get any frames. I was getting like just handfuls of frames per second. We are still getting a clean 180 frames per second with all the detail turned up. So yes, this computer is way overkill for any game that I am going to play, which is not really what it's going to be used for. It's going to be used for video editing, and it will sometimes be asked to run a game at 4K and record my screen at 4K and record my camera directly into the computer at 4K all at the same time, which I feel quite confident is going to be not a problem. So hopefully this was a fun video. Again, not really for, you know, people who are into computers. This is more for somebody who's never going to build their own computer, but they're just kind of curious what it means when somebody says they're building a computer. So anyway, yep. Computer. We did it.